Peace is often just a pause between two conflicts we are tired to finish. A lot of people think World War II started in 1939, but the fuse was lit in 1914. To understand the destruction of Europe, we have to answer the essential question: how did the unresolved conflicts of World War I help with the rise of extremist ideologies which led to the systemic destruction of the world as they knew it? The world of 1914 was a powder keg of main causes. Militarism, with militaries building up an arms race to be the best. For example, Britain and Germany were competing and making the best dreadnought battleships. Meanwhile, alliances that turned a spark into a continental war due to the alliance system, as a small conflict could turn into a really big one due to the Triple Alliance, which was Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy, but Italy backed out in 1915. The Franco-Russian alliance, in which Russia and the French were allied, which was due to the German Empire strengthening, and the French were also allied with the British. The British had an alliance with the Russians called the Anglo-Russian Alliance due to wariness of the German Empire. These together were called the Triple Entendre, so if any got into a conflict, it would cause a chain reaction. Imperialism was its competition for colonies and resources, and nationalism was the final trigger, as it was an intense desire in ethnic groups like the Serbians in the Balkans to have an independent nation. This led to the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, and when it finally blew in Serbia, it introduced new World War I technology that the world wasn't ready for, such as machine guns, tanks, and poison gas, which turned the continent into a graveyard. The Age of Anxiety. By the time that the smoke cleared in 1918, Europe was war-torn, and you could see the trauma in the modern art of the era. Movements like Dadaism proved that the world felt meaningless and nihilistic. The peace that followed was the Treaty of Versailles, but it was just a pause. War guilt clause placed the sole responsibility for the war on the Weimar Republic, which led to debt and economic hardship, and it left Germany bitter, as the people thought they were being unfairly punished and humiliated. This made grounds for extremist ideologies who were waiting for a chance to reclaim Germany's national pride and strength. But then, it came crashing down, with the Great Depression that proved that the global economy was a house of cards that relied on others. While Western democracies experimented with Keynesian government to jumpstart the markets, like in the US, Great Britain, and Scandinavia, but the sheer desperation of the masses allowed a new monster to grow: totalitarianism, as people wanted an easy way out and cling to any hope. The rise of the Iron Fist. In the East, the Russian Revolution had already built a Marxist-Leninist state, and then Joseph Stalin took that vision and turned it into an industrial machine, using 5-year plans collectivization to modernize the USSR, but at the cost of millions of lives, including the mass imprisonment of the kulaks. While in Italy, Benito Mussolini invented fascism, promising to return to old. In Germany, Adolf Hitler rose by promising to burn the Treaty of Versailles to the ground, because it felt like a stab in the back, and his actions like building an army and remilitarizing the Rhineland were to directly spit in the face of the treaty while everyone was watching. The 1930s was a sandbox for these dictators where they could test ideas. The Spanish Civil War and the brutal carpet bombings of Guyana showed everyone exactly what the next war would look like. But the West wasn't ready, and they chose the policy of appeasement, handing Hitler what he wanted, like a toddler who got everything they wanted at the Munich conference, just to buy a few more months of peace. In the 1930s, the mask came off. Hitler signed the Nazi-Soviet pact with his enemy, Stalin, and unleashed blitzkrieg on Poland. This was Lightning War, which was fast, brutal, and mechanized, the complete opposite of the trench war that they faced in World War I. With this, France fell, and Winston Churchill stood as a voice of defiance against this savagery. In the East, where he promised blood, toil, tears, and sweat, but this wasn't just a military struggle, it was a total war, where every factory, every worker, and every civilian was essential towards the war effort. At the same time, that means everyone was a target, where houses, schools, and homes were the target of fire bombings. Kids and women had to practice air raid drills. Imagine that. All of a sudden you hear sirens and you have to know what to do or you're dead. In New Order Germany was built on the foundation of systemic hate against Jews. The Holocaust was the industrialization of death. From the Nuremberg laws where they were stripped of citizenship and rights to the Wasani Conference where they planned the camps. The Nazi state used its total power to attempt the erasure of an entire identity in death camps like Auschwitz, where work was liberty. It remains the biggest warning of what happens when a state has absolute control over social organization. The endings and new beginnings. The end began at the beaches of Normandy, where D-Day opened the door to freedom, but as the Allies closed in, the map was already being split amongst the Big Three. At the Yalta and Potsdam conferences, where the Big Three decided the fate of the post-war world, they held the Nuremberg trials to demand accountability for the crimes against humanity from generals, soldiers, but the peace was short-lived. As the Nazi threat died, a new one arose as the post-war settled. An iron curtain had been draped, splitting the world in two and marking the birth of the Cold War, where the old European order was gone, replaced by a global competition for the future. While the Iron Fist has fallen, only for the Iron Curtain to take its place. History repeats itself and we never listen.